Start. Hello and welcome.
Hi, Michelle, would you like me to start, or I didn't know if you had any introductory remarks?
Thank you, Joanna. I do have some introductory remarks and then we'll get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the City of Vacaville's second redistricting workshop. Today's workshop is also being provided in ASL and Spanish. Please set your language translation selection, which can be found in the lower ribbon to the right, to Spanish to hear the translated format, or in English to hear the untranslated format. When you are recognized to speak, the moderator will ask you whether you have a question or comment in English. For ASL translation, please type your question in the chat. Questions or comments in other languages may be sent to City Clerk at cityofvacaville.com or districtelections@cityofvacaville.com. Now I will hand the presentation over to Joanna Jin of BVK.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joanna Jin, and I'm with BVK, and thank you for joining us for our second community workshop. Every 10 years following the census, agencies that elect their representatives by district are required to redraw their map boundaries. And we have been retained by the City of Vacaville to serve as your demographer and redistricting consultant. At our last community presentation, I went over two things. I went over the redistricting process and also how to use the online mapping tool in order to draw and submit maps. Today, we will go over the project timelines, review some draft maps. I'll also provide a refresher on the redistricting process, and then I will discuss next steps as well and the upcoming hearings. So with that, there are 6 districts in the city with 1 council member representing each district. The city transitioned to by-district elections in 2018. And so the 6 districts were drawn in at that time using the 2010 census data. And as I mentioned, every 10 years, redistricting occurs in order to redraw the districts based on the most recent census data. So this redistricting process will be based off of the 2020 census data. So every council member's term is a 4-year term, and the terms for the 6 council members are staggered. So that means that 3 will be up in 1 election cycle, and then the next, and then 2 years after that, there will be another 3 that will be elected. So districts 2, 4, and 6 have their elections in November of this year, along with the directly elected mayor. And districts 1, 3, and 5 will have their election in 2024. So the redistricting process is addressed under state law under the Fair Maps Act. We have had 2 public hearings so far where we presented an overview of the redistricting process and solicited input on communities of interest. At the last public hearing, which was public hearing number 2, we presented the draft maps and sought input. And that's what I'll be doing today. I'll be providing an overview of the draft maps that were presented to council at that hearing. And then after I receive your input from today, we will have another public hearing next Tuesday. And council will try and narrow down the map selection and hopefully introduce an ordinance adopting the final map at public hearing number 4. And that final map must be posted at least 7 days prior to adoption without any modifications. And just as a quick refresher, I wanted to explain the rules when we are redrawing the district maps and how federal law, state law, and other traditional principles affect that. So under federal law and the and the US Constitution, the district should be equal in population. And this gets to the one person, one vote principle, where every district has equal representation for voting purposes. And under federal law, the minority vote cannot be diluted. Racial gerrymandering is prohibited. And if there is an ability to draw a majority minority district, then the council should do so. But this does not appear that this will be possible based on the reasons that I'll discuss later. Then in the second column, which is a California criteria for cities, that is governed by the Fair Maps Act. And it provides a criteria for drawing district boundaries in order of priority. The first is that the districts be geographically contiguous or share common boundaries. It's not enough for the districts to touch at a single point. The second is that the communities of interest should be preserved to minimize neighborhoods from being split up. A community of interest is defined as a population that shares common social or economic interests that should be included in a single district for the purposes of fair and effective representation. The third is that residents should be able to identify and understand their district boundaries. And this can be accomplished through local landmarks and common boundary lines, such as common roads and streets, or even the interstates, such as I-80. And the last is that the districts be geographically compact and that the populations be clustered together rather than dispersed in different places. Other traditional principles to keep in mind are that the impact to voters and when they vote should be minimized to avoid them transitioning to a different election year. So as I mentioned, there are 3 districts that will be up for election this year. And ideally, those voters would vote in those same election cycle and every 4 years thereafter. Of course, when redrawing the map boundaries, it is common to preserve the existing core of the district. And so there may be some shifting of voters along the edge or periphery of those districts. And whether or not they shift to a district, a different election year will depend on whether they are shifting to an odd or even number district. And part of the reason for that is if there is a shift, it could push out a voter's opportunity to elect their council representative to 6 years instead of 4. And so the goal is to minimize that impact. And then of course you have the converse, which is some voters who shift election years may go from 4 years to 2 years to the next time that they can vote for their next council representative. So going to the other traditional principles, to the extent that all things are considered equal and everything is compliant with federal law and California law for drawing the maps, we want to try and respect the voters' choices and continuity in office for the electeds. There can be some consideration for future population growth. However, that is very limited, and those circumstances include when the population cannot be balanced without creating any concerns regarding continuity or compactness due to the geography, or where established communities of interest want to remain in the same district, but can't do so without considering that future population. And as I mentioned, I already discussed the 4 existing districts. And so with that, I wanted to give you some information about the existing makeup of the districts right now, and then we can talk about how that'll change with the map options. So in front of you, you have the current 6 districts. District 1 is in red. And you'll notice that there appears to be a non-contiguous parcel right over here, which is that it doesn't appear to share a common boundary. I mean, it is still connected along the 80 over here. But this area here that is not in red is actually the PG&E Vacaville Dixon substation. So District 1 includes the Nut Tree Airport, Nut Tree Plaza, the outlets, and the auto mall. District 2 in green is actually south of the I-80, and it includes Leisure Town, Calson Elementary, various parks, and there is also a non-contiguous parcel you'll see over to the east, and that is the Easterly Wastewater Treatment Plant. District 3 in light blue include the outlets and the commercial core of the city. District 4 in tan includes the Wood High School and Sierra Vista. District 5 in purple includes Lagoon Valley, the medical facility, and the state prison. And District 6 to the south includes the Cambridge. So I will be toggling over and showing you a Google Map feature as well, just to give you an idea of what that'll look like. I'll do that a little bit later once I can navigate my mouse a little better. But before I do that, I will explain how the 2020 census data impacts the existing districts. So right now, the total population for the city is 95,909. So the ideal population for each of the 6 districts would be 1/6 of that total, or 15,984. So for example, I will walk you through one of these rows here to explain what each of the numbers mean. So District 1 has a total population of 17,997. It has a raw deviation of 2013. What that means is that is the difference in how far off it is from the ideal population. And so the percentage deviation is arrived at by taking the raw deviation for the 2013 and dividing that by the ideal population of 15,984. You'll see that the percentage deviation for District 1 is at 12.59%, which means that it needs to be rebalanced. It's impermissible to have a percentage deviation above 10% for any of the districts. So what that tells you is that in the past 10 years, there has been considerable growth in District 1, and that will need to be adjusted a bit. So to the right of that, you have the Latino population, and then you have the citizens of voting age population, those 18 and up. And then to the right of that, you have a breakdown of each of the pockets for the CVAP. So you have CVAP non-Latino white, CVAP non-Latino black, CVAP Hispanic, CVAP non-Hispanic, CVAP American Indian, Alaska Native, CVAP Asian, CVAP Hawaiian, and CVAP other. And so what the demographics tell you is that there really isn't a majority minority that appears to be achievable, because the majority of the CVAP is essentially the CVAP white group. And I will talk a little bit more about the distribution of the population later too as well. So in looking at this, there are clearly two districts that stand out that exceed the 10% deviation, and that's District 1. I mentioned that it's overpopulated, and District 4, which is underpopulated in representation. In addition, I wanted to show you that the total deviation, the number in red to the lower right of the slide, is 23.26%. And that is derived from taking the district with the greatest population, that's District 1 at 12.59%, and the least populated district, that's District 4 at negative 10.67%. We take the spread of that, you add the two numbers together, and that is how you get the 23.26%. So the goal is to also bring that down under 10% as well. Okay, so the findings from the data that I just presented is that total deviation is above the acceptable range. It's exceeds 10% at 23.26%. Creating a majority minority district may not be possible due to the demographic makeup of the community. There were comments raised at the last public hearing about whether a majority minority district is possible. And the definition of a majority minority district is really whether there's one singular minority group that accounts for 50% plus one for CVAP purposes. And so we can look at this further as we are analyzing other maps, and the current district boundaries will need to be adjusted for population balance. And with that, I will try and just show you what everything looks like. On the Google map. Okay, and so over here, I have a Google Map feature, and I will be using this to show you the existing district boundaries. That's perhaps too close. But over here, you'll see that the black solid lines are the outlines of each of the districts. So over here, you have District 1. Over here, you have District 2. In the center, you have District 3. To the south of District 3, you have District 4. To the west of 3 and 4, you have District 5. And to the southeast, you have District 6. And what I will be doing as I go through each of the 5 map options today is I will show you how those new map options will affect these existing boundaries. So I just wanted to introduce that to you for now. Okay, and so again, the considerations for drawing the map, at least the preeminent considerations, are the federal requirements. There's the equal population that should be balanced to try and reach the ideal population, but within the acceptable 10% deviation. The racial minority voice should be preserved or created to the extent possible. And then you have the state requirements that the district be geographically contiguous, and that everything be measured objectively. As I mentioned, communities of interest is is a consideration under the Fair Maps Act. So you can have physical boundaries such as natural or artificial boundaries that you're considering. That includes roadways, riverways, or railways, parks, schools, and other landmarks. The district should also be compact as well, again, that they're not clustered far apart from each other. And you can also consider political boundaries too as well, such as school attendance areas or district service areas or other divisions by federal, state, or the county. However, communities of interest do not include incumbents' residences or political affiliations. So that means that it shouldn't include any consideration of partisanship at all. So the purpose of this meeting today in this workshop today is to discuss what your neighborhood looks like as it relates to each of the map options. And if you have any comments about the boundaries, that would be helpful to hear from you on. So with that, I'm going to go into the draft map options. This is the first one that is presented. It looks very similar to the existing map. And so I'm going to go through what this data means. So over here, you'll notice that the total deviation has gone down from 23.26% to 9.06%. So it's acceptable. All five map options that I'll present will be legally permissible. You'll just be seeing the differences in variation for the numbers as well as the boundaries for each of those options. So districts 2, 3, and 6 were not affected at all with this change. They remain wholly intact, which means that none of the residents will move. However, District 1 decreases in population, District 4 increases in population, and District 5 also increases in population as well. And so I will show you what that looks like on Google Maps. Okay, and so here we have the existing district boundaries, and when I click on map option 1, you'll see that it's highlighted, and you'll see where the changes are. As I mentioned, districts 2, 3, and 6 remain wholly intact. So again, everyone stays in the same place, but where you do see the shifting of the boundaries are right over here between districts 1 and 5. And that means that District 5 actually takes over a portion of the west side of District 1. The other area where you'll see some change is over in District 4, where District 4 actually takes over a portion of District 5. And just to show you how that looks like, you'll see the existing area over here between 5 and 4. And when I click on the option 1, you'll see that District 4 has actually grown quite a bit. And so with that, I'm going to toggle back over to the presentation to present the findings. Okay, and so the findings are that the total deviation is acceptable. It's at 9.06%. It retains the core of the existing districts. It does create compact voting districts, so they're nice shapes. Districts 2, 3, and 6 remain wholly intact. Nobody moves. And there is some slight shifting of the voters moving between districts 1, 4, and 5. It does not create a majority-minority voting district. And now we have map option 2 before you. And with map option 2, districts 2 and 6 are the least affected, and districts 1 and 4 are affected the most. And I'll explain that with the numbers. So with District 6, it's now at 16,690. So there was a loss from its existing population of 172. District 2 actually took the difference and actually increased by 172. So there was some minimal population shifting over there. Districts 1 and 4 saw the biggest change. And as I mentioned, this is because there was this recognition that District 1's population has grown so significantly in the past 10 years that it needs some adjustment downward. And District 4 also would need to increase. So District 1 saw a loss of 2,583 residents. And in this map, District 4 saw an increase of 1,641 residents. District 3 had a slight increase of 249 residents, and District 5 had a slight increase of 693 residents. So overall, the deviation is at 7.98%. Again, that's down from the 23.26%, and it's under the 10% that's required. And if we look at the numbers overall by district, that deviation by district is less than 5%. So with that, I'm going to shift over to the Google Maps so you can see how that change looks. Okay, so I will remove option 1, and now I will present option 2. So as I mentioned, 2 and 6 were affected the least, so you don't really see any adjustments along the edge of those boundaries. And districts 1 and 4 were affected the most. So if we look at District 1, it seems as if it's actually had some adjustments over here by districts 3 and 5 shifting over into with the loss of that population went into districts 3 and 5 in these new maps. And I'll also show you how that has affected District 4, which has grown. It's very similar to how it grew in the last map, where it's growing south and to the west, right over here. And with that, I'll go back and just review the findings for map option 2. Okay, again, total deviation is at 7.98%. There's some more significant changes from the current boundary than the last one because the deviation here is lower. So again, the deviation is the difference from the ideal population. So the lower the deviation, that means that there has been more shifting in terms of the voters moving around. This map option also creates compact and contiguous districts. It doesn't create a majority minority voting district. And it has the greatest movement between districts 1 and 4. I apologize, it says 3, but it's between districts 1 and 4 have the most shifting, and with districts 2 and 6 having the least effect. Okay, and moving on to map option 3. This was submitted by a member of the public, and it appears as if the districts were renumbered too, but overall it appears very consistent with how the existing cores are drawn. And so I can discuss each of that. What I think you'll notice is that District 1 has become District 5. District 3 for the most part has stayed the same, but currently District 3 is here. So District 3 has moved upwards to the north a bit. District 4 has become District 6. District 5 has become District 4, and District 6 has become District 1, and District 2 has remained the same. So it just appears as if there might have been a renumbering based on how the online mapping tool was utilized. And so with that, I will discuss the data. There is a total deviation of 9.33%. And there is a change of the 4 districts, but overall it is compact. And it appears that each of the districts has a deviation less than 6%. And so with that, I will switch over to Google Maps so you can see how that looks. Oh, I just received a comment from a panelist that they cannot see my screen. So thank you for letting me know that. Okay, so we are now at the third map option here, where you'll see that there have been a lot of adjustments, particularly in the center of the city. And so as I mentioned, District 3, which is currently in the center of the city because it has a commercial core, has shifted northward and is now in a blue color. And so it has gone northward. District 1, as I mentioned, has now become District 5. And it appears as if it's gone and shifted a little bit to the south too, on the east side. District 2 remains the same. It appears that there's a non-contiguous portion of District 5 here because there's a yellow pocket. And then you have District 4 becoming District 6 as well, but with the shapes kind of growing over to the north. District 6 has become District 1, but it looks as if that district has shifted over a little bit to the west, and there's some slight adjustments over in District 5. Okay, and with that, I will shift back to the presentation. Okay, and the findings again are that it's a 9.33% total deviation. It was submitted by a member of the public. There is an existing change from the configurations of the current districts. However, it appears as if they have just been renumbered. So council, if they wanted to, could adopt the configuration as it appears, but they could just renumber accordingly to make it consistent with the existing numbering system. It appears also that districts 3, 5, and 4 are slightly less compact, and that one of the districts has a non-contiguous parcel. I believe that was 5, not 2, and it does not create a minority voting district. And with that, we will proceed to map option 4, which was submitted by a member of the public. And this also has a lot of population rebalance as well. And that is because there's a total deviation of 2.43%. And overall, for each of the districts, it's actually under a 1.25% deviation. And I'll show you what that looks like on the Google Maps too. Okay, so now we have the existing map and we have map option 4. And you can see where the shifting here occurs. District 1 has shifted a bit where some of that portion of the population has grown into districts 3 and 5. District 2, for the most part, has stayed pretty much the same. District 4 has grown slightly to the west and just slightly to the north as well. District 3 has grown to the west, and 6 for the most part looks intact, and 5 for the most part looks intact. And so with that, I will transition back to the findings. And thank you all for your patience. I know that there's a lot of toggling back and forth. Okay, so for map option 4, the total deviation is 2.43%, which is acceptable. It is a map that was submitted by a member of the public. It somewhat resembles the current boundaries, but with a lot more shifting around the edges. But you do have the center or the core of the existing districts preserved, and then you do see some more shifting along the edges of those districts. As I mentioned, District 6 looks relatively unchanged. The map does create compact and contiguous districts. It does not create a majority minority voting district. Okay, and with that, we will move on to our last map option, which is option 5. And this is also a map that was submitted by a member of the public. The total deviation is also low. It's at 3.64%. And for the most part, it results in compact and contiguous districts. There isn't a majority minority district that has been created. There was a question about, well, what happens when you take all the different groups here, all the different CVAC groups that are minorities, and total them up? If you do that, it does create a coalition district, but it's not the same as a majority minority district. So over here, though, the percentage for each of the districts in terms of deviation is low. It's at 2.15% or less. So I will transition over to the Google Maps so you can see what that looks like. Okay, and over here we have the map option 5 up, and you can see, again, this is very common for District 1 to have some of its population shift and go to Districts 3 and 5. You also have District 3 shifting a little bit over to the west as well. And District 6, again, remains for the most part intact. There has been some slight adjustments around the edges for Districts 4 and 2. Okay. And with that, I will transition back over to the presentation. Okay, and so the findings are that this has a total deviation of 3.64%. Again, it was a map submitted by a member of the public. It resembles the current boundaries. District 6 remains unchanged. It does create compact and contiguous districts, but it doesn't create a majority minority district. And we did take a look to see whether it would be possible to create a majority minority district. However, when we looked at the data, it appears that the Hispanic citizens of voting age population are the single highest minority population in the city, and they comprise approximately 19.8% of the total CVAP population. So in order to create a majority minority Hispanic voting district, the residency of every Hispanic citizen of voting age would need to be concentrated in a dense geographic area, but that's not how it looks like. It appears that that group is pretty much spread out throughout the city. And so it will unlikely be possible to draw a majority minority voting district. And so the sources of information that we utilized when preparing these maps are demographic data, the census data, staff expertise, your input, and council input. The Map Vacaville.org website is a great resource. It has all the redistricting information. If you want to go and look at the maps, or if you want to look at any of the reportings, you can find all of that on there as well, and it'll be maintained on that website for 10 years. And it's also regularly updated too, as new information becomes available. And here's just a front page for that website or web page. And you can see all the information that's provided through the hyperlinks here. You have the public meetings or hearings and agendas. You have the draft maps. It has information for how you can draw a map, although the deadline has passed. There is a resource for you to use in looking at the frequently asked questions. And there's also a way for you to contact someone if you have any questions. So for the next steps, I'd like to open it up, and in case any member of the public would like to provide input on the redistricting process, their communities of interest, or any feedback on any of the maps that you have seen today. And what I'll do is I can take that information and present it at the third public hearing next Tuesday. And so just to give you an overview of where we are again, we have had our first public hearing, a second public hearing. We've had our first virtual workshop on how to draw the maps. The deadline for submitting the maps have already passed. Today we're having our second virtual outreach workshop to go over the maps. And then next Tuesday, we'll have the third public hearing where the maps will be re-reviewed again. And we'll also have an additional map that was submitted by a member of the public available. And we'll also consider input and we'll also provide input from the workshops as well. And then on the 22nd of this month, we'll have our fourth public hearing, hopefully to introduce an ordinance adopting the final map. April 12th would be the second reading or the actual adoption of the ordinance adopting the final map. And that would, if everything goes on schedule, that would make the deadline to adopt and submit the final map to the county registrar of voters. And so with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions and comments about the maps.
I don't see that we have any questions at this time.
Okay, that sounds great. I guess if there are other comments that are received, then we can take that, but that would conclude my presentation.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation today, Joanna. And we'll go ahead and see you at the March 8th City Council meeting. That will begin at 6 p.m. And we'll review the maps and take more testimony at that meeting.
That sounds great. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you everyone for attending today. I appreciate it. Have a good one.